Welcome to Culture Talk, where we discuss culturally relevant topics you can use to start conversations about your faith. I'm joined today with astrophysicist Jeff Zweerink. Thank you for joining me.
Sandra, good to be back.
We are happy to talk about your brand new book, Escaping the Beginning.
I know, I'm kind of excited.
Yeah, it just came out, and you know what? I'm excited for readers because this is kind of an interesting conversation for many of us who aren't aware. For Christians, like, we understand from the very first pages in the Bible all the way through Scripture, the Bible's talking about a beginning, about in the beginning, and we understand this because the universe was formed at God's command. Like all these verses that show that there was a beginning. Is it possible to understand Scripture as being other than the universe out of nothing?
Well, you know, it's an interesting question because I did kind of wrestle with the idea of, okay, does there need to be a beginning? You know, after all, time is created, so why does there have to be a t equals 0? But as I've talked with my colleagues, theologian friends especially, I do really come back to the idea that there does seem to be this necessary thing that creation is contingent upon God, that's incredibly important. But even in that, there does seem to be this need for a beginning. So if you're going to get rid of a beginning, that's going to be very problematic to maintain historic Christian doctrine in doing that.
Right. And you said t equals 0. Is that time equals 0?
Yeah, it would be time equals 0 or a beginning. You know, scientifically, what does a beginning mean is a little bit of a hard thing to evaluate.
Right. So from a Christian perspective, we understand that creation had a beginning. We say creation ex nihilo, that it started from nothing and it was through God's hand. But now we're hearing that scientists are exploring the possibility that there wasn't a beginning. You know, many of us think that that case has been settled, that there is an origin. What is prompting scientists to even delve into that, examining that the universe might not have a beginning?
Well, that's a fair bit of what I spend my time talking about in the book is why did we think there was a beginning in the first place? And a lot of the kind of the settled science, if you will, harkens back to Hawking and Penrose developed these theorems as if general relativity is true and if energy behaves a certain way, then as you run time backwards, eventually you run into this infinity where the laws of physics break down, and that's a beginning. The reason why scientists are saying maybe there's something else is because there's reasons to think that general relativity may not be what governs the universe right at the early cases. That's where you get these quantum theories of gravity. And so if that's true, then maybe the laws of physics don't break down and there was no beginning. Or maybe energy behaves differently, and that's driven by how we look at the universe. There are mechanisms we propose to explain some of the things that we see that no longer satisfy that energy condition. And so there are scientific reasons to think maybe we don't have the complete picture and we need to keep exploring so that we get a more complete picture.
So some might say then, if scientists are going back and saying, you know, maybe this isn't the case and maybe things don't break down, that might lead some people to feel like science can't be trusted because they're going back and kind of changing what we thought was the case and what we thought there was evidence for.
You know, and there's people who will say that. It's like, you know, science is always changing. How can we trust it? And it's really an inaccurate characterization. Is what we're doing is we're getting a more and more complete picture as we keep studying, because very often what we do is as we study and we get a more complete picture and we start testing it, we realize, oh, there's more to this than we saw initially. And it was the increased study realized, hey, there's more to study there. What I find remarkable is if you're going to level that change there, you're going to have the same problem with Christianity, because there are things about Christianity that we're still studying and wondering what's going on. And the more we study, the more we know to ask questions. In each instance, though, there are these things that are pretty well established, things that are going to be hard to get around one way or the other. And so that's true in theology as well as science. And so, no, science isn't just changing willy-nilly. It's actually getting more and more complete as we study it.
Right. And I think you make the distinction in your book that it isn't that science is incorrect, but that it is incomplete. And so the more we delve into and examine the universe around us and the record of nature, the more we you know, understand our environment. But then the same with our theology. The more we dig deeper into that, we learn more about our faith and we learn more about our beliefs. Right.
You know, I mean, you know, even just looking at why we're even asking this question when Hawking and Penrose first came up with that theorem, if the laws of physics break down, you can't study before that. Well, now as we have ideas that maybe the laws of physics don't break down, now we actually have a tool to ask what might be going on before. It's incredibly difficult, and we really don't have any data that weighs in, but it's now a question that we could ask that we didn't even know how to ask before.
Right. And that's fascinating because then it allows us to then further investigate what's going on in our world and in our universe, and then know more about our Creator, which is what we would say from a Christian perspective, that we're getting closer to knowing the Creator.
Exactly. And if God is who he says he is, what he's revealed in Scripture is going to be, what we find in creation is going to corroborate that.
Right.
And we're never going to know that if we don't go out and understand and kind of remove some of those areas. Well, maybe it could be otherwise.
Right.
Part of the reason why we think there's a beginning is because we spent so long trying to figure out how to get around it. And so I expect that trend to continue even as we go forward.
So what are some of the models that are being proposed that actually escape the beginning? What do they look like?
Well, there's kind of two classes. And one is a class where instead of the laws of physics breaking down and there's a beginning, that you end up with an eternal universe, something where the whole timeline is filled from positive infinity to minus infinity. That's one class. But there's another class where there's actually a beginning, but that beginning just kind of fluctuates into existence. So there's no cause to it. So those are kind of the two general classes where we're exploring, can you really escape a beginning?
Right. That's fascinating. But let's say we do find out that there is a beginning. What does that mean?
I think if you end up with a beginning, at the very least, that harmonizes what Christianity and the Bible has said all along. I think that's a powerful statement. And if you do have a beginning, now you have to ask the question, what's actually the best explanation for that? I think there are people who would say, no, it isn't God. But as I've looked at it and wrestled with it, to me, the best explanation for a beginning is there's a God who started it all.
Right. And I think that'd be a great opening conversation with someone if they're also wrestling with, is there a beginning? Investigate, what does that mean?
Exactly. It's a great conversation starter, and you're going to get it will help you delve in to the extent the person's willing to share. You'll get a lot of insight into what they're thinking, and that always helps when you're engaging in a conversation.
Thank you so much for that, Jeff. If you'd like to receive Escaping the Beginning as a thank you for your donation in the months of September and October, visit reasons.org/2819.